Okay, we are starting Pride and Prejudice today. I know less than nothing about this. I know that Jane Austen wrote it, and that there's a man in it named Darcy, which I am going to hope that that is his last name, because it just reminds me of the song by Johnny Cash, Boy Named Sue, which by that I mean I would expect him to be bullied. When buying the book, I did find Jane Austen's Wikipedia page and saw that she died at the age of 41. Unfortunate, but okay, for expectations, the only thing that I really want out of this is yearning. I love a book with some yearning in it. It's just so much better than Insta-Love. Insta-Love is just horseshit. Shout out Twilight. All right, well, out the gate, it doesn't speak the most highly of women, which, given the time it was written in, I'm going to have to assume this is something I will just have to get used to. Women are basically like property in this story. Not ideal, but that's probably the point of it, right? Like to talk about the differences in how women and men were treated back then. This time period is just so tedious. New guy moves into town. They want to introduce their daughters to the new guy, but the dad has to meet the new guy at a certain time in a certain place. Otherwise, the women can't talk to him first because that's improper. So then the women would have to wait until a public circumstance to be able to engage with. It just goes on and on like that. But also the weirder thing is that all of these people call Mr. Bennet Mr. Bennet. I mean, Mr. Bennet's wife calls him Mr. Bennet. The kids call him Mr. Bennet. Why is husband and father not good enough? Why does it have to be so formal? I feel like they walk around in tuxedos all day long. I cannot for the life of me figure out who the main characters of this story are. Mr. Bingley shows up at a party. He's with Mr. Darcy. I am almost positive Mr. Darcy is the main male character. But he hates everybody. He won't dance with anybody. He won't talk to anybody. The one person who he is told to talk to, Lizzie, he turns and looks at her and he's like, I mean, she's tolerable. That's how he describes her look. She's tolerable. I know that I just harped on love at first sight, but if these two end up together, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth, I will never be able to forget that his first impression of her was like, nah. Yes. I think you should be attracted to the person that you end up with. Crazy 21st century take? I don't know. Oh, and also, Mr. Darcy is supposed to be like more handsome than Mr. Bingley. And if he's not, I'm going to call that shit out in the movie. All right, so Mr. Darcy now kind of does like Elizabeth a little bit. And here's the problem with that. Best I can tell, he only likes her kind of because of her wit. She's fun to talk to. Which part of that is endearing, right? You like a person for who they actually are as a person. But are we just going to overlook the fact that he looked this woman in the eyes and was like, nah, she's not very attractive, you know? Like, wait, like it is great. It's great that you like a person for the person being a person. Maybe that's the ideal situation. But at the same time, ego involved here a little bit. Don't you want the person who likes you to also be attracted to you? He said, hell no. He looked at her and he went, no, I don't like her face. And I don't think she's going to forget that. What I know about women, she's not going to forget that. I feel like I'm going to miss so much in this book. I never read classics, and Jane Austen's prose are so lyrical and poetic, and there's such a distinct flow specifically to conversational dialogue. And the subtext says way more than the actual words being said, and it is so different from modern novels. It's beautiful. I love it, but I also am not attuned to it, and I feel like I'm going to miss every important detail. And if I do that and you love this book, I am sorry. I can't fix it, but I'm sorry. Hey, I don't like these people. They're just so prejudiced. They don't like Jane because her family doesn't have enough connections, even though everything about her is apparently great. And they don't like Elizabeth because she doesn't care enough for decorum. A complete lack of disregard, walking 3 miles through the storm to check on her sister. What? She was being a good sister. She found out her sister was sick. She walked through the muck to go check on her. And that lost her points in their eyes. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Can you imagine living in a society like this where everybody is this judgy? Well, I know that we have our own judgments and stuff, but I don't feel like it's that bad. Okay, I was listening to Pride and Prejudice, but I just bought the physical book because, I mean, look how gorgeous it is. But I was also really nervous about missing a lot of the details with the higher prose, so I'm going to switch to physical reading. Here's my problem. I know that in the audiobook, I'm on chapter 12, but this is Roman numerals. I don't know Roman numerals. Did I just actually flip to chapter 12? What's V2? No, that's 7. I'm almost positive that's 7. What is 12 in XII? Should have known that. Should have known that. School was a long time ago, people. There it is. We are off to the races. And you see, this is why people make fun of the British. Out of nowhere, we have a Mr. Collins, who is Mr. Bennet's cousin. Mr. Bennet, keep in mind, is the father of all of these daughters who were trying to get married to people. For some reason, if Mr. Bennet dies, Mr. Collins gets everything. He gets the house, the property, like he can just kick the girls out of it. Mr. Bennet doesn't get to decide that. He doesn't get to pick who he leaves his own stuff to. How does that make any sense? Why would his daughters be homeless if the dad dies? Shouldn't the estate be theirs? Does it become theirs if they get married? I also don't think I'll ever get over their use of the word handsome in describing women. It's just so different from our modern language. If I were to call a woman handsome in terms of a compliment, I think I'd get slapped. Mr. Collins is there to marry one of Mr. Bennet's daughters, who he is related to. Why does every one of these stories have to have some type of incest in it? Like, what? Oh, God. It's not that hard to find somebody to marry who you don't share very close DNA with. I don't know who needs to hear that today, but just believe that, please. We officially have a new player on the board now, which is Mr. Wickerman. One of those two. Anyways, he was liked a lot by Mr. Darcy's father, and apparently Mr. Darcy doesn't like this guy at all. I think they're kind of like mortal enemies. And so once again, Elizabeth is back in this place where she doesn't like Mr. Darcy because he thinks that he just holds grudges for no apparent reason whatsoever. And we don't know the reason. And I'm once again sat here going like, why is this story focused on a guy who is probably a bad guy? And like boring as all hell too. Like 10 seconds after this, they go to some ball and Mr. Darcy asks Elizabeth to dance. And then he doesn't say anything. They just sit there and do this twirl for 3 songs, I think, and don't say anything to each other. To the point where Elizabeth has to go, I think you're supposed to be talking to me. He says like a sentence and then shuts up again. I just don't get it. He is maybe a bad guy, definitely bland, and is for some reason the center of this story. I always regret asking this question, but am I missing something? Wickham. His name's Wickham. Now somebody is claiming that Wickham is the guy who's a bad guy, and that Mr. Darcy did nothing wrong. And Elizabeth, who definitely has a predisposition to not like Mr. Darcy, isn't having any of it. She's like, none of you know this man. I've witnessed him firsthand, how he is rude and uncaring, and he says that he holds grudges. I think Mr. Darcy is the bad guy. That's what Elizabeth is saying. So is this the point of the book? Is that it's actually a mystery and we have to figure out who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? And I don't know who to believe here. I'm kind of on Elizabeth's side because I have also seen Mr. Darcy be very standoffish, and he did admit that he holds grudges. So I want to see them fight. That would give me a lot of enjoyment right now. I want to see Mr. Darcy and Mr. Wickham fight to death. I got to pull out the audiobook for this one. The incest cousin who wants to have relations with one of the daughters has decided he's going to try and marry Elizabeth. I hate it. We're not going to get back into that. But here is what he says when she rejects him.
It is usual with young ladies to reject the addresses of the man whom they secretly mean to accept when he first applies for their favor, and that sometimes the refusal is repeated a second or even a third time. I am therefore by no means discouraged by what you have just said, and shall hope to lead you to the altar ere long.
This motherfucker looked her in the eye and went, I heard you say no, and I don't think you meant to. He said, I don't believe in no means no. I am flabbergasted. He said, I'm not discouraged by you saying no. I'm pretty sure you meant to say yes. Like 4 pages later, Mr. Collins proposes to one of the other sisters. Elizabeth turns him down. He goes, I don't think that's what you meant. And then the rest of that scene was so funny because she was like, I promise you, it is what I meant. And he eventually takes it to heart after she does this like 7 times. And so he just goes to the next sister and he's like, how about you? And that one said yes. So the cousin fucker gets what he wants, which is to fuck a cousin. I got that wrong. And it is somehow worse. Mr. Collins did not propose to Elizabeth's other sister. He proposed to her best friend. What world are we living in? What world is this? I'm not removing the label of cousin fucker, because if things had gone his way, he would be. Oh, wait. This is bad. This is really bad. Mr. Collins is the guy that, for some reason that doesn't make any sense, would inherit the house that all of the Bennets live in. And that's why it was a good thing that he was going to marry one of the cousins, was because that meant that the estate got to stay in the Bennets family. Now that he's marrying Elizabeth's best friend would get her house. I don't understand how that works at all. If Mr. Bennet dies first, then Mr. Collins and Elizabeth's best friend would inherit the house that Elizabeth lives in. Does it make sense to you? Because it doesn't make sense to me.
Things are not great in the Bennett household. So a while ago, Mr. Bingley, I don't know if you remember who he is. He's the one that's good friends with Mr. Darcy, and he bought a house out near the Bennets. Spent a long time out there. They went to some dinners together, and Mr. Bingley was going after Jane, Elizabeth's sister. Then Mr. Bingley kind of just up and disappears. He leaves. He goes back to London, and they don't really see him anymore. Elizabeth was just told that was because Mr. Darcy broke them up. They said that Mr. Bingley went back to London to get away from Jane, effectively breaking them up. And now, once again, Elizabeth hates this son of a bitch who is rude in public, doesn't talk to her while they dance, doesn't talk to anybody that he doesn't know. He just completely ignores them. And now finds out that he's the reason her sister is in such pain. This guy's a terrorist. And I cannot, for the life of me, figure out what the point to all of it is. This son of a bitch, Mr. Darcy, just showed up at Elizabeth's house and told her he loves her. Love. Does this guy know what planet he's on? In what world? In what world have the events that we have discussed, and you and I, we're in this together, in what world have those led to this confrontation? No time has passed from the last clip. Elizabeth found out that Mr. Darcy's the reason that Jane and Mr. Bingley broke up. Elizabeth so badly doesn't want to be around Mr. Darcy that she skips a dinner, says that she's sick. Mr. Darcy then shows up at the house, goes, "I heard you were sick. Oh, and I love you." Bitch, what? If it doesn't start to make sense soon, I'm going to get, once again, 0 out of a million. This had better add up in the end, or it's a 0 out of a million book. But you got to read the subtext. It's what's said in between the 0 out of a million. He just admitted to breaking them up. I'm going to stab him with a rusty blade.
I got God again, didn't I? The book's called Pride and Prejudice because he is prideful and prejudiced. He has been a sizable cock because he loved her so much, but he knew he couldn't be with her because her family is lower class, essentially. I don't want to accept it because I feel like I only have two options. I either do accept it, which means that in all of the instances that they've had together, he has fallen in love with her, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever because they have not had good conversations, connection, any of the above. She outwardly disdains him, and that is reflective in her statements to him, which means that option 2 here is that he fell in love with her instantly. What did I fucking tell you people about insta-love? That's kind of what this would indicate, isn't it? Is that he immediately knew that he loved her. That's insta-love. It's either that or he's a masochist because he fell in love with somebody who was humiliating him. I don't love this. I'm also pretty sure that he talked Mr. Bingley out of being with Jane so that Mr. Darcy didn't have to be around them all the time. This seems excessive and illogical, and I don't like it. And I want to be very clear. I don't dislike... It is not his actions of being prideful and prejudiced that created this outcome that I don't like. That part makes sense to me. Living in this society where you kind of have to meet your exact same level or try to marry up. Here he is in a situation where he's kind of a renowned man. He has a lot of money. It has said that he has a lot of power or influence with the clergy and the church, whereas her family does not and does not bring a lot to the table. It is simply the fact that they started on bad terms. They have always been on bad terms. Oh my God, I'm in love with you. If you had shown me something that showed them falling in love and then him do a hard turn, because now I'm just not buying it. It's not that I don't like the story. I don't like this one particular aspect of it that makes the rest not feel possible unless it's insta-love. He wrote her a really long letter, and I feel like I'm about to be wrong about some things. All right, let's pause, everybody. Let's just take a break. We found out a few things in this letter Mr. Darcy wrote Elizabeth, and I will concede a few points while standing on business of a few others. This is going to be a very interesting statement because he is acting out of pride and prejudice still with his friend. I think that he broke up his friend with Jane because he thought that ending up in that family, again, not a great choice. He also outright said that he did not think that Jane loved Mr. Bingley. And I get it. If you think that your friend is kind of being duped in a way, you would act in the same manner. He's wrong. I do think that Jane likes Mr. Bingley, loves him even maybe. But even though he's acting in Pride and Prejudice, I do not think that he is a bad guy. He's doing it because he thinks it's the right thing for his friend. Does that make sense? Like there's a weird level of honor in that. He wants to honor his friend and protect his friend. I can understand that. I also think, just with the way things were worded, this is the beginning of Elizabeth falling for Mr. Darcy. And now we're going to be able to track her falling in love with him because she's going to be able to see what his character actually is. Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you. He did kind of ruin the life of that Mr. Wickham. He did a little bit, but that also wasn't his fault. Mr. Wickham had told some lies, pretended to be somebody he definitely wasn't, in order to get money out of the Darcys. When Darcy denies him of that, this guy then tries to marry Mr. Darcy's sister to get her fortune. And so Darcy was like, enough of this guy. And I think that he acted in accordance there. Once again, trying to be honorable in breaking up that relationship to protect his sister. I don't dislike him as a person. I still definitely want some answers to why he is so snooty in public instances. And I want a little bit more on the trail here of how he fell in love with Elizabeth, because I'm not buying it. So the story's definitely hiding some things here and there. And if we can clear up those two pieces, I will be on board. If we can't, have fun yelling at me in the comments, because I'm going to die on this hill. Elizabeth just had a breakdown because she found out that her younger sister ran off with Mr. Wickham, which is not great. That's not what I'm happy about. But in her panic, she confided in Mr. Darcy, and I have no reason to believe this, but I think he's going to fix everything. I think he's going to do the knight in shining armor thing and something. I don't know. He's going to kill a man, or he's going to like bribe the church or something. I don't know. He's going to fix it. And I think they're going to fall for each other. I think I deserve that after everything that's happened. Everybody's just lying to each other. This whole thing is just a lying fest. Nobody tells the truth about anything. Nobody ever says exactly what they're thinking. And I have to sift through their lies and deceit. And what I want in the end is I want a straightforward romance between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth.
I swear to God, 80% of this book is just trying to figure out who's telling the truth. Elizabeth is now in Mr. Darcy's estate. For some reason, Mr. Darcy is not there. I think she's snooping. Which, no offense, and I think you understand what I mean when I say this. Women haven't changed in 200 years. But all of the servants and everybody that like lives there and works there swears up and down Mr. Darcy is the greatest person to have ever existed. And so Elizabeth now is like reconciling this with everything that she has thought and heard and seen, and is going, some of this adds up, but some of this doesn't add up. But why would all of these people who have known him since he's a child talk so highly of him if he's not? And anyway, I think that switch is starting to turn. I think that she is starting to do that, like, am I going to like this guy? Is this guy worth liking? I think it's starting to happen. We're going to get to see it too.
He was a gambler. Mr. Wickham racked up like 1,000 pounds worth of debts and then just fled town with the Bennett's daughter. What a snake oil salesman. He comes to town playing the victim, saying that Mr. Darcy ruined his entire life. Lies, we found out. And now he pulls this, which he also tried to pull with Mr. Darcy's sister at one point. This is never gonna happen. I know it's not, because there's nothing been indicated that the story would head in this direction. But what I want to happen is I want an old-fashioned 18th century duel. I want Mr. Darcy to pull guns on this man. I want them to walk 10 paces, turn around, and fire at each other. And I want only one of them to hit. Mr. Darcy's. I want him to kill Mr. Wickham. Oh, I gotta head to dinner, but it's starting. It's starting. Elizabeth is now like, I think she's on board. This is her talking about Mr. Darcy.
She wanted to hear of him when there seemed the least chance of gaining intelligence. She was convinced that she could have been happy with him when it was no longer likely they should meet. What a triumph for him, as she often thought. Could he know that the proposals which he had proudly spurned only 4 months ago would now have been most gladly and gratefully received? She began now to comprehend that he was exactly the man who, in disposition and talents, would most suit her.
But that's also her saying that she doesn't think it's going to happen. We got to turn it around. We got time. We got time.
They got me. Is that what you want to hear from me, huh? They got me. The book is named perfectly Pride and Prejudice. Why? Because every fucking person is prideful and prejudiced. But specifically, I am talking about Mr. Darcy. I think I have an answer for why he was rude in public and all that stuff. It is because he viewed himself above these people. I don't fully have proof for that, but I think he looked at them. He even looked at Elizabeth at the time and was like, I'm not even going to show that I am remotely interested because these people are beneath me. Even so far as to say that he's not attracted to her because he doesn't want to draw suspicion. And it's like, I got. That's the second time now. I feel not nearly as bad as when I was watching the end of Breaking Dawn there, but it feels kind of similar. It feels like a baby shot of that. Because all I had to do was look at the cover. Stupid as shit. While I have you here, though, Mr. Wickham. Bang, 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 reload, bang, 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 bang. That man is essentially holding a woman hostage. And this book doesn't outright say it, but I'm pretty sure he's holding her virginity hostage. Anyways, he asked for like $5,000 and then like $100 a year after Mr. Bennet dies, which they agree to. And then Mr. Wickham and Lydia show up at dinner and they act like nothing ever happened. And these poor people have to sit here and endure this son of a bitch who just held their daughter for ransom. She's so happy she's rubbing in everybody's faces that she's about to be married. I don't think she even knows that she was a hostage. Good morning, rise and shine. Today is my last day with the book. I think I have 7 chapters left. I head to Harry Potter World tomorrow, so I have to finish it today, and I still have not a clue in the world how it's going to end.
He did it. I don't know what exactly he did, but we just found out that Mr. Darcy was the one who found Wickham and Lydia, and he negotiated their marriage, and I think he paid for it. And then he went to the wedding, which I don't know if I'd have done that in his shoes, but the world is healing right now. Wait, so I want to believe that he did that to gain Elizabeth's favor, but that doesn't really make sense because he kept this to himself until he no longer could. So does that mean he just did it because he's a good guy? She's done for. I think she would marry him on the spot right now.
And I think now would be a good time to make a confession. I've kind of been pretending like I understand how money works in this book, in this world, a world that we live in. And I don't. They keep saying that like so-and-so person has 5,000 pounds a year. This person has 10,000 pounds a year. From who? Who's paying them 10,000 pounds a year? Where are they getting that from? Is it the government? The military? I don't think they have jobs. They're always free. They're just travel across the countryside. That's the only thing these people do. That and go to balls and date like 12 women at a time. Did the stock market exist? I don't understand where they're getting the money from. She is head over heels in love with him, and she's waiting for Mr. Darcy to make a move on her. But he's not going to do that because she outright told him, don't ever do this again. I don't want to marry you. Wait, I think actually she said that to Mr. Collins. I think she also said something very similar to Mr. Darcy because at the time she was not having it. Now it turns out that yes, he is prideful and he is prejudiced. Wonderful name. But he's also like a good-spirited human. He believes in right and wrong. I like him. I'm starting to like him. A mysterious guy. I get the allure now. The allure to that mysterious guy who doesn't like talk a lot and he just kind of does things with actions. I get it. I'm starting to get it. I kind of get it. I am in a state of emergency because Miss Catherine de Bourgh, the worst person in this entire book, just showed up and said that there's a rumor floating around that Elizabeth and Darcy are going to get engaged. First I've heard of it. Nobody told me. Nobody brought me into this circle. I think first Elizabeth has heard of it too, but Miss Catherine de Bourgh shows up all hoity-toity and wants answers to everything. She demands them. Literally demands them. Listen to this.
And can you likewise declare that there is no foundation for it? I do not pretend to possess equal frankness with your ladyship. You may ask questions which I shall not choose to answer.
I like that.
This is not to be borne. Miss Bennet, I insist on being satisfied. Has my nephew made you an offer of marriage?
Imagine being talked to like that. Someone who's I demand to be satisfied. I like Elizabeth, though, being like, hey, you can say whatever you want to me. I don't have to answer these questions. I like her. But Miss de Bourgh goes on to say that Darcy has been sworn to her daughter since like the time that they were born. And for my purposes, I don't care. That doesn't mean anything to me. I don't think he's on board with it either. So when is he? At this point, I feel like I'm just waiting for him to show up and do another proposal. And also,
are you lost to every feeling of propriety and delicacy? Have you not heard me say that from his earliest hours he was destined for his cousin? Yes, and I have...
Stop talking. Why? Why are people trying to marry their cousins? Every fucking time! No wonder he's against it. He should be. Okay, I am going to play you one more thing because this is my biggest gripe with the book. I'm about to say bad things about it, just FYI. We finally get to the pinnacle moment where Darcy and Elizabeth are alone. And Darcy outright says, my feelings from last summer have not changed. I would still like to marry you. And as happens so often in this book, we don't get to see the conversation. Here's what I mean.
After a short pause, her companion added, if your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me on this subject forever.
He's basically saying, I still have feelings for you. If you tell me that you still don't, good, I'll never talk to you about this again. This is what happens next.
Elizabeth, feeling all the more than common awkwardness and anxiety of his situation, now forced herself to speak, and immediately, though not very fluently, gave him to understand that her sentiments had undergone so material a change since the period to which he alluded, as to make her receive with gratitude and pleasure his present assurances. The happiness which this reply produced was such as he had probably never felt before, and he expressed himself on the occasion as sensibly and as warmly as a man violently in love can be supposed to do.
Do you see what I mean? Like, this is the conversation. This is the conversation where they give each other their feelings and talk about like, oh, I'd actually like to marry you. Actually, things have changed. I see you in a different light. We don't get to hear any of that conversation. It just goes, oh yeah, Elizabeth told him that her feelings had changed and he was really happy about that. That's what it tells us. It fucking tells us. We don't get to hear that conversation. Are you kidding me? This happens so often in this book where you are ripped out of a moment with this exact same thing, where you are told prose instead of dialogue. Is that not frustrating for y'all? Because it's not just the romance aspect, it's anything. Any conversation where you're like, this is a really interesting conversation, that shit happens. They stop the conversation and then you're just told how it ends. Fucking hell, I hate that. I know the book is more than romance, but you just read 350 pages for it to come to a conclusion and you don't even get to see the payoff. It's bad writing. It's like, so much of the book has been great. This aspect of it is actively bad writing. It is done. And I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit disappointed. You just watched my whole experience with it, and there were pieces of it that I absolutely loved, without question. Jane Austen is a master of situational drama and dialogue. My problem with this book is that she didn't know when to double down on that. I took a note of this about halfway through the book where there were scenes that would just abruptly end where you're going, whoa, wait, we're just now getting to the good part. Exactly like that scene that I just showed you a couple minutes ago. It happens over and over again. And my main gripe here is that was the climax of the book, that scene. From there, they get engaged, and then Elizabeth kind of backtracks and goes and talks to her father and talks to Jane and explains like, oh, actually, I don't hate him. I love him. I think he's a man of wonderful character. And then everybody wishes them a happy-go-lucky, enjoy your life, and the book kind of just fizzles out and ends. And I'm not saying I'm a better writer than Jane Austen, but like those two scenes where she talks to her dad and she talks to Jane, those should have happened leading up to the moment where he proposes, back when the rumor is started and people start talking about like, oh, are you going to get engaged? Her family should have heard that rumor and gone, well, no, that's preposterous. Elizabeth doesn't like Darcy. It should have helped increase the stakes leading up to that climactic moment and help reveal to the audience Elizabeth's full intentions and her own realization about this man. And in that process, the audience also would have gotten to see Mr. Bennet learn about how Mr. Darcy helped his daughter out with Mr. Wickham. The series of events here were just off. I think they happened in the wrong order. I think that things were left out that should have been included. And that's just unfortunate because a deflating end to a book leads to a deflating end for a video. I don't have anything to sit here and be like, oh, and this plot point happened. I mean, it didn't. It kind of just like, yeah, those two got together during a conversation we didn't even get to see, and then happily ever after. And now I'm in a situation where I have to rely on you, because are these things that you think happen repeatedly in her novels? Because if so, I'm not really interested in reading any others. But at the same time, I'm also really excited about the movie because I believe these things are going to be fixed by Hollywood. I don't think that this is a me thing. I think that modern day Hollywood, whenever this was filmed, 2005, 2010, I don't know. I think that there are staples of storytelling that Hollywood is going to notice, and they're going to fix a number of the things that I have just complained about. If I'm wrong about that, okay, but I think that they're going to. So with that being said, 3 stars. As promised, every single thing that I read or watch is going into the content galore section of Patreon, so the full review will be up there, and I'm going to dive a bit more into characters. I'll tell you right off the bat, Elizabeth is my favorite character of this book. I think that she is a wonderfully strong woman, wonderfully written woman who, even for the times when faced up against so much prejudice and being told how you're supposed to act and where you're supposed to go and when you're supposed to be there and blah, 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 she lives on her own accord. And I love that. But thank you so much for being here for this journey. While you're watching this, I am in Harry Potter world. So what's going to happen is I am going to drink a butterbeer for you, and you are going to hit the like button for me. And that's called an exchange of services. Thank you.